Hey everybody, welcome back to Alan Wall's Photography. I am Alan, and today we're going to take some pictures. So I have this thing that I do when I'm feeling a bit down in the dumps. What I'll do is I'll go to one of the two local thrift shops around here, and I'll go dig through the stuff in there looking for inspiration. And you'd be surprised how often it works. I'll find something or a couple of some things that I either want to photograph or I think would be components in some kind of wacky DIY project. But today I hit the Motherlode. Well, not really, it was just junk, but fun junk. And as I was looking around and picking out various pieces, nothing cost more than 99 cents today. I decided there and then that this would be a great treasure trove to use to do some unique kind of product photography, still life. You can call it what you want. It's just an interesting setup. Every single piece of it can be substituted with something else, so you don't have to go hunting for this stuff. As we go through, I'll tell you what else you could use. But let me show you the main things that I found. One of them, the thing that's sticking in my face here, actually has nothing to do with this project, but I had an idea when I saw it. It's an old curtain rail that was 99 cents. And I am always looking for things to suspend backdrops from, either for photography or for doing videos. I've been on a roll lately where I've been making backdrops by throwing pieces of fabric into dye. It's been disastrous, but great fun. And now I've got a lot of good bad backdrops to use. But sometimes I want to have more than one. Or the other day I was doing something, I had 3 of them set up, but I don't have 3 of these gizmos for hanging them. But it occurred to me when I saw this curtain rail that stretches out a lot further than this. It goes from there to there. I'll show you a better picture in a minute. But here's a pro tip for you. If you're looking for something to hang a backdrop on, buy one of these cheap curtain rails, preferably the one that's about 1 inch in diameter. And then all you've got to do is take some of that black heavy Gorilla tape that I talk about, that just, it never comes off. Once it's on, it's on for good. And then a piece of leftover PVC pipe from whatever plumbing you've been doing or project you've been building. And this slides right over the joint like so. And I've tested this, not with myself, but with things that are pretty heavy. And it does not bend with this thing on there. It does bend if you don't have this on. That's a pro tip. Take it to the bank. 99-cent backdrop rail. Trouble is, once you put that tape on, there's no way to collapse it. So they can be pretty wieldy. All right, so what we're going to need for this experiment is some kind of mirrored surface. Now, I got the inspiration for this watching a photographer do some product photography using a highly polished mirrored metal surface. He had a thin piece of steel or something, and he got it polished and polished up to a fine shine. I bought about 10 pieces of metal last year to try to do the same thing, and ended up cutting my fingers quite badly. And I'd been buying the wrong metal. I'd been buying aluminium sheets, which don't shine, and galvanized steel sheets that don't shine either. I spent 4 hours trying to make a piece of galvanized steel shine, and all I did was turn my hands black, basically. So we're going to do something else. on the way back from the thrift shop, I popped into a big store that we have locally, the name of which rhymes with Walmart. And when I was in there, I was looking for a cheap mirror, and I hit the Motherlode there because they are selling full-length mirrors that you hang on the back of your door in these awful cheap plastic frames, but they're actually glass mirrors for $4.50. Unbelievable. It's a big mirror, and it's going to be perfect for what we're doing, because we're going to try to get an infinity kind of concept going on here where the mirror seamlessly blends into the background. Talking about backgrounds, I found a roll of the coolest wrapping paper. I use a lot of wrapping paper for backdrops and macro and other things. I keep tons of the stuff around. But this particular one has very subtle little colored dots, not symmetrical, looks like paint splatters all over it. And I have a feeling when this is out of focus and has a light shining on it, it's going to look really, really cool. I don't know that because I haven't done it yet. So that's the other thing. I am using a very cheap portable carry it with you softbox that I've only used once or twice. So far, all I know about it is it catches the wind very well, and if it was a bit lighter, it would probably be a very functional kite. But I haven't really used it for photography. The idea of this is that it, as you can see, folds down really small. When you unfold it, you'll have a heart attack because it just springs open. I've opened it several times and it freaks me out every time. If you're going to do something like this, and this was inexpensive, you're going to need a Bowens adapter to put your flash in. I'm not using studio lights for this. I normally would, but I'm trying to keep the gear as basic as possible. So I'll be using my 2 remaining speed lights. Hopefully they will keep going for the whole of this video. I'm going to use a honeycomb grid on one of the speed lights. You don't have to. I'm going to use the softbox on the other speed light. You don't have to. You could also just use a piece of tracing paper and use it like a big scrim and put the speed light above it. I'm going to walk you through all the steps of setting it up. If you're going to use a backdrop on a roll like this wallpaper, wrapping paper, you might need a couple of super clamps, but there's many ways you could get around not having to use that. A couple of regular old spring clamps would be handy. A remote for your camera so your camera doesn't shake is optional. You're definitely going to need a tripod. I've never talked about my tripod. One of these days I need to tell you about this tripod because it's fantastic. And it has that Benro 3-way head that I love for any kind of product or still life shooting. This thing's great. A couple of cheap light stands. If you have a short light stand, like one of these that actually gets you pretty close to the ground, this would be handy to have. And you're going to need one of these for one of your flashes. That's just the shoe that comes with a flash. Okay, so what we'll do first is we'll set this up. And as we go, I'll tell you what it is I'm doing and the effect that I'm trying to get. Okay? Let us begin. So let me explain what we're going to do for these pictures. What I'm trying to get is an image of an object that is reflected in the surface that it's sitting on, but I want the reflection to be so realistic that it actually looks like there is another one of these objects, which means we're going to have to photograph it in such a way that you can't see the edges or the ends of the mirror. The mirror has to blend seamlessly into the background, which is where the trick in this technique comes in. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to have a backdrop a couple of feet in this direction. The reason I don't have the mirror on this table already is because I've polished it, and I'm going to polish it again, because that is probably the single most important step in setting this up. These things attract dust. Talking about dust, the backdrop behind me, I don't know if you can see it in this shot, but you'll see it again. I picked that up at the thrift shop this morning too for 99 cents. It's a black sheet, and I brought it home and I noticed it had a few dog hairs on it. So I washed it, and when I took it out of the dryer, it had more dog hairs, like a lot more dog hairs. So I washed it again, and after drying it, it's covered, matted in dog hairs, and I don't have a dog. There's nothing with dog hairs on it anywhere in my house. It's really bizarre. Anybody who knows what's going on here, maybe my sheet's turning into a dog or something, but anyway, I thought that was an important digression. First thing we're going to do is I'm going to walk you through how to set up this inflatable softbox and how to use this adapter. That'll be the first thing we do. The second thing we do is I'll show you how to set up the backdrop, because we're going to be lighting the object with the softbox from above. And I mean right above, just above the subject on the mirror. Our camera will be at the far end of this skinny little table and at eye level with the object. And then for the backdrop, I'll show you how to set this up. We'll put this as flat and as straight as we can behind the table, and I'll show you how to set that up too. This is going to have a separate speed light on it. The subject will have one, and I've got one other light that I may or may not use the grid on to shine some accent fill light from the side or possibly from the back. We'll see what happens when we start taking photographs. But first things first, I'm going to, just because it's easier, when I get this set up, the softbox, I'm going to use a big C-stand because I've got a spare one today, and I'm going to use this to suspend the softbox. You don't need to. You could very easily do this with any kind of cross beam that you could erect, maybe a couple of regular light stands and a wooden dowel across it, or one of my window curtain holder things. So you'll see. We'll get to it in a minute. So the first thing we have to do is open this beast. This is from a company called Neewer. Neewer. Oh no, it's not. It's from a company named Godox. I swore I was never going to buy any more Godox stuff. Well, I did. I thought it was from Neewer. The box says Neewer. Anyway, this is the part where it opens on it. Jeez. Yeah. It's utterly terrifying. Opening it and getting it ready. It's kind of not very good in videos, is it? This thing opens on its own automatically. Closing it is an entirely different matter. You need a degree to close one of these because it's bizarre the way it folds up. All right, so this is open. Now what we'll do now, and I do hope you'll be able to see this from this crazy angle, but you'll notice that the back of the softbox has four little flap type things, and then there's metal inside there. And these things are really stiff. So what we do is we slide and I'm sorry if you can't see this, but I'll show it to you when I get it done. You put 3 of them in, and then you just kind of force the 4th one in. It will eventually go. And once it goes, it's not going anywhere. It is well and truly on. Hopefully you can see that now. All right, good. The next thing we need to do is put the diffusion material in. And the reason I bought this, well, the reason I bought this was because it was cheap, cheap, cheap. The other reason, the reason I tell people is because it has 2 different diffusion panels. One that goes inside. Let me just put this on. It's got little like paper clip things on the end that really are easy to put on and virtually impossible to get off. I think that must be their motto at Godox. Easy on, impossible to get off. All right. Okay, one more rubber band thing. I'm quite impressed with the workmanship of this, to be honest, considering, oh dear, considering how little it costs. So that's the way the one diffuser goes on. The big diffuser on the outside has this like aggressive combat hook and loop stuff. It's like Velcro, only it's actually quite painful to press on. It's extremely aggressive. And there's a row of the soft part on the inside, and you just stick it to that. See, that's pretty good if you're out in the field and you want some diffused softbox light. It's not a very big softbox, but it's quick and easy to put together. And it's actually pretty sturdy and substantial when it's popped all the way open. There you go. So that is my softbox. Oh my goodness. I was telling myself, use the big table for this part so people can see what you're doing. And I thought, the people that watch my videos are so smart, they don't need to see it. They'll know what's going on. The flash, I like to put it in this way. It doesn't really make any difference except for the fact that you can read the numbers on the back. And there's a paddle that screws down and holds the flash in place. You want to get it as centered as possible. So that you're sure that the light rays are going straight through both bits of material. Okay, and that is all there is to it. And then there's a receptacle on the bottom for putting it on a light stand. So chat amongst yourselves while I assemble this. Okay, so here is another pro tip. If you don't have and don't want to buy one of these big trapeze things to suspend a backdrop from, or if you're often using small backdrops for macro photography, just get a couple of cheap light stands like these. They're made by Emart, E-M-A-R-T. And they're cheap. You can buy them in batches of 4, I think, for about what a Manfrotto one costs. Then take the, if you're using these Camvate clamps, I think it's pretty much the same on the small rig ones that we have used before. Just screw the clamp right onto the light receptacle on the top of the light stand, and do another one over yonder on this one. It's pretty good, one-handed clamp attachment. Then all you have to do is open the clamp up and align these things. I left my stick over there, but basically all you're going to do to hang your backdrop is rest whatever pole you're going to be hanging the backdrop from right through here. Make sure it's nice and level, and there you go. Now there is an important trick here that I need to show you. Okay, so this is an important tip. One of the issues that you're going to have if you're using rolled up wrapping paper or rolled up anything as a backdrop, it's going to have a tendency to roll up at the bottom. And while you can just let enough of the paper out so that it doesn't appear in the picture, it's still better not to leave it like that, because what happens is the paper kind of bows out towards the camera, and it can create some odd effects. So what I recommend you do is try to find a square stick as opposed to a round one. The square stick will hold in the clamps on top of the light stands better, but it also makes it a little bit harder for the roll of paper to unroll on its own. Just those little edges help. So this is going to be going in here like that, very straightforward, and then the two ends will attach to the light stands. Now this is the tip. I use this square perspex plexiglass, acrylic, whatever it's called. I have several sticks of this. I use it for mounting subjects, for macro photography, and a bunch of other things. It's very handy, but it's quite heavy, and that's why I use it for this. But in order to prevent the paper from wrinkling up and taking on strange shapes, this is what I recommend you do. I'll do it sideways. Well, no, I'll do it towards you. So what I do is very simply just clamp a piece of perspex rod, but anything you've got, a metal bar or even a wooden bar is all you need to put a little bit of tension on the paper so that it holds. So what I'll do is I'll lay it down like that. Usually I do it at the edges, but you won't be able to see. And then one at a time, just put on a couple of clamps. Just like that. Except don't tear the paper like I just did. I know this doesn't look like rocket science, but I think it is pretty much the same as rocket science. So we'll get, these are not my favorite clamps, these plastic ones. The little bits at the top swivel right out of the way when you're trying to use them. All right, I feel like there's a wrinkle in there. Yeah. It's worth spending a minute doing this. You'll see the difference. Now, no, see, they do that, which will drive you insane. Hang on. All right, that's good. Now, when we take the paper and unravel it, it will remain super flat and even, like so. And that's a pro tip. That's good enough reason to watch this video to learn that tip. Okay, I'm going to have to hang this on the stands, so if you would excuse me for a moment. Okay, now what you might need is a couple of these very small clamps. They come in packs of 10 at the hardware store. A paper clip would do fine, a bulldog clamp would do fine. The reason is you want to stop the paper from unraveling more than it needs to. I recommend extending your light stand enough to where the paper is able to hang completely free, unencumbered by the legs. Okay. You think I'm going to cut that out of this video. It is hugely gratifying to know that nobody laughed when that happened. Everybody's dead serious. I'm going to try it again. I haven't really done anything else other than wait for my red face to calm down. So we put the crossbar like so. You can see how these little clamps will prevent it from unrolling. So I'll take them off. What I'm going to do this time is actually clamp the wooden clamps. I normally don't bother with that, but as you can see, you probably should. All right, and then just allow the paper to unravel. You don't need a whole tremendous ton of it. Compared to the table, that is going to be perfectly fine because we're going to be shooting perpendicular to the surface here, so it doesn't have to go further than the end of the table. And then I'll put these little rubbery clamps on there and it'll stop it from unraveling like so. Now ignore the wrinkles, that was from that previous mishap. I think that'll be fine even with the wrinkles. If you're working in a light room and your paper's too thin, close the curtains or put another piece of paper or a black foam board behind it. It's not going to matter because we're illuminating the front of it, so you're not going to see anything through this. By the time I get everything set up, the sun will have gone down and we won't have to worry about that. Okay, so with the backdrop in place, all I need to do now is take one of the small stands, raise it up just a little. I don't want it to come up above the edge of the table, mind you. I don't want to see it, obviously. And then I'll take one of the other speed guns, which I'm going to set in slave mode, slave 1, not slave 2. You know what the difference is? Slave 1 will discharge the flash that's set to S1 whenever it sees another flash. S2 means that it will ignore the first flash because if you're using a flash system that sends out a short pulse of light for the focusing and everything, that won't trigger the flash. Only the second flash of the flash will trigger the slaves. But we don't need to worry about that because my lights don't do that, so we're just in slave 1. And then I'll attach the flash to the top and I'll position it about dead center, and I will use the grid to create a ball of light about where the table starts and up. So it'll look more like a teardrop, like so. Okay, let me do that. To attach this flash, first thing I like to do is get the grid on because they can be a little somebody really should invent a more reliable way of attaching these things to flashes. I think Mr. Wong's flash adapter things don't rely on tape like this, but there you go, that's good. And then I'll put the flash on the hot shoe, cold shoe, plastic shoe, sandal, I guess. Tighten that down, position that using the built-in 1/4 inch or 32/17 of an inch, whatever it is. I never understood the fractions of an inch thing. It seems unnecessarily complicated. And then that's going to be a little bit too high. I know you probably can't see that, but I'm positioning it down just a little and then angling the flash up just a little. So all I have done is attach, all I've done is attach a cheap speed light to a plastic cold shoe, screwed that into the end of a mini light pole, and then there is a better way to do this, to attach this using a piece of Velcro on the flash, but I never use it on this flash, so that's why I don't have any Velcro on it. So then all we have to do is aim this on the center line of the table we're using. I can tell you right now that's going to be too high. Bit of a comedy of errors thus far. All right, I'm going to go get some Velcro. This is bonus pro tip number 3. If you don't have a plastic box full of Velcro, you're not living. This stuff comes in so many different varieties. There's some of this that is so tough that you could hang a human being from your ceiling. I wonder if that's legal in America. It probably is. But anyway, I've got the little square pieces and the strips you sew on and the strips that you glue on. So this is the soft kind, so I need the hook part. And this stuff is also from that W shop, and it is very inexpensive for a big roll of this. And I'll just cut a piece off, stick it somewhere down here because I'm going to be taking it off when we're done. This video is going to take me a long time to edit if I keep dropping stuff. I could save time and leave it in, I guess. There we go. It doesn't take much to hold it in place. I love Velcro. It's good for almost everything. Now, it's not a bad idea while you're down here to actually fire your flash. I'll start at about 1/16 power just to see where the ball of light is. Okay, it's right there and it's too small. So we're going to move it back and I'm going to increase the power to 1/8. And I'm going to aim it up just a fraction, not even a whole click. Let's try that. Perfect. So that is where I want that. And this is going to be hidden by the edge of the mirror. I think we're at the point where I can get the mirror now. So let me go do that. Amazingly, this glass mirror which I don't know how long it is. It looks like it's about 3 or 4 feet long. It is actual glass and it has a very nice mirrored surface on it. Now, the most important step, if you do go buy one of these things, be very careful taking the frame off, because it's plastic and it's glued on, and you can end up with these chunks of leftover plastic on the side. These aren't going to interfere with this photograph today, but it's a good idea to very carefully try to get as much of that off as you can. But these things are really very breakable. They're thin, which is one of the reasons I like them, because see how the end of the mirror is actually tipping down a tiny bit? And as we move it forward, you may see it more clearly, but at the end, it's bending down to take the cut edge of the glass out of the picture somewhat. Now, like I say, the most important part is getting this clean, because you will be amazed how just a few granules, a few nanograms of dirt, or in this case, dog hair. There's dog hair on it. I guess my backdrop is now shedding. But anyway, you think, well, you only need to clean where you're going to put the subject. But actually, no, you need to clean the whole thing. You'll see why. If you try this experiment, you'll see that this has more dirt on it than the glass. Let me go get a cleaner one. So here we go. This is actually a lens cleaner of some kind. You know what I'm going to do is I'm going to brush this off. It really does have a lot of hair on it. Stay focused. Okay, well, that's where the dog hair's coming from. Bad idea. There is probably somebody out there who could give me some tips on how to clean glass better than this. I know there's a liquid that does a good job, but I can't remember if it's lemon juice, vinegar, bicarbonate of soda, petrol. And it's not something you should experiment with indoors if you don't know. So I'm using Windex. Windex is one of the only cleaning liquids that I insist on the name brand version. That was something my wife taught me. It's like as soon as I stop cleaning, dust appears from nowhere. This might be one of the reasons people recommend vacuuming, even if you don't think it needs it. That's a once a year job for me. Don't like that work at all. As you can see, I have the softbox attached to a C-stand. So like I say, any other way you can attach it to where it'll hang directly over this is fine. Now this is where it gets important. As you would imagine, the angle of this light over the mirrored surface is really important, because if you angle it too far in this direction, you're going to get light bouncing off the mirror into your backdrop. And we really don't want any light on the backdrop except the stuff we're putting there. Likewise, if you tip it too far in this direction, what's going to happen is you're going to get lens flare, because your flash is going to be bouncing straight back up into the lens. So it's a matter of experimenting, but what I prefer is to angle it about 3 or 4 degrees, that's all, towards the front. That will be enough to where it'll throw any reflections up above the backdrop, and it'll keep everything out of the camera. Normally, I will position the softbox about a foot to the front edge of the softbox in front of the camera. So I think we're very close to being able to take a test shot and see what things look like. There's going to be a whole string of pro tips all in a row right now. When you're positioning your camera, if you're using a table like this that has a bottom to it, you want the camera up close to the table. So lowering the front leg of your tripod a little bit less will allow you to put it onto a surface like this and keep the camera completely flat. I left this positioned like it is because it's too high, and I want you to see that that's too much space. So pro tip number 17 is if you extend if your tripod has a neck on it, extend it a little bit. Even though we don't like to shoot with this like so, it means we can position the legs, get everything the way we want it, and then very gently lower the camera into position. Now, I am fine lowering it all the way, moving the camera back off the glass and lowering it all the way to the edge of the lens itself. If you want to do that, that's fine. But the most critical thing is you want to be shooting absolutely parallel to the surface of the mirror, if at all possible. A tiny bit above isn't going to matter, but once you start getting any significant from this height, you're going to throw everything off because you're going to be seeing a lot of the top of the backdrop. So what I'll do is I'll lower the camera just until I like the position. Well, it's still going to need to come down a little bit further. This is a really critical part of getting this shot set up. But what I was saying was, if you want to move it back beyond the mirror and then drop it another centimeter like so, you won't see the front edge of the glass mirror, but you will be looking straight down it. And that's what we're looking for, is this magical look as if there's nothing here except another object. All right, so where was I? I'm using a Godox flash trigger, one of the X1 TNs, 2.4G, whatever that means. And this is set up to trigger all of my flashes. But you might not have one of these, and that's fine. You don't need it. If you don't have a flash trigger to use with your camera, you probably almost certainly do have a pop-up flash. This is one of the only DSLRs I've ever seen that doesn't have a pop-up flash, which is good because I never use one. It just gets in the way. But one thing about a pop-up flash that is extremely useful is you can set it on 1/128th power and use it to trigger all the other lights in slave mode. You can't do that on this camera because there is no pop-up flash. Next pro tip. If you don't have a cable release for your shutter, you should invest in one. If you're doing any macro at all, you know that this is mandatory. Once you start doing it in macro photography using a remote, you won't go back when you're doing other things. It just removes that variable of camera shake from pressing the shutter button. All right. I think that's all I had. I'm going to turn the flashes on. I am going to go get my my subject, and we're going to take a couple of test shots. Now, you'll remember from every other flash video that we've done, you're going to need to do a test shot first. I'm going to leave the studio lights on so that I can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to take a shot with no flash, but using the settings that I intend to use for the shot, which is going to be a shutter speed of 1/250th. I'm going to keep the aperture pretty open. I would like to, well, let's start at 4.5 and see what that should be within the range of whatever camera you're using. And the ISO, I'm going to drop mine to 64. Just put it on the lowest you have. That'll give you plenty of room to mess around with the other settings. Make sure your white balance and everything else is set up for flash the way you normally would. And if you're not shooting in RAW, shoot in RAW. Shoot in RAW, and then you can go into Photoshop and remove the dog hairs that will have arrived by the time we take a photograph. All right, let me turn everything. Well, before I turn everything on, let me take a photograph. Pro tip, whatever number we're up to, remove this thing. I've never taken a good photograph with that on. It must block the light or something. If you're using a macro lens that has vibration control, turn it off when your camera's on a tripod. That is a very important thing to remember, because if not, it is going to try to stabilize a stable platform, and you're going to get all kinds of motion artifact in your photograph. So only use vibration control when you're hand holding the camera. So that's off. I'm in manual focus mode. None of the flashes are turned on. And it is a completely black. Let me double check. Yeah, there's nothing. I mean, there's the faintest little bit of luminance where the windows are open. So I'm going to close the curtains, and then we're going to turn on the flashes one at a time. Okay, so I have positioned the subject, and yes, I'm using one of my bracelets. And no, this is not an advertising video. They just lend themselves well to this. I've positioned it about 2 feet, 2.5 feet in front of the camera. The flash that I'm using to light the background is on a pure optical slave. It won't be triggered by my flash trigger. All of those ones are broken. So I'm going to go ahead, and I've turned the backdrop flash on and the softbox. It is lighting the top of the bracelet beautifully, but it's not getting any light underneath. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring the bracelet back a tiny bit. Then I'm going to bring the softbox back about 9 inches, and I am going to angle it a few more degrees forward so that I can get the light bouncing up and into the bracelet from underneath. And we're not getting any light on the backdrop. I don't think that flash is getting triggered. So plan B. Let me see if I can find a ring flash to use for the back. Otherwise, I might have to put a continuous light back there. Let me see what I can do. I moved the bracelet back about 9 inches so that it would more fill the frame on my camera. I brought the softbox back a foot, maybe a little under a foot, and I angled it just a little bit forward. I replaced the flash on the background with one that actually flashes, and let's give it a shot. I think we're good to go. I'm using manual focus, just as if we were doing macro photography. It's always a good idea if you're uncertain to zoom in and make sure that the very front part of what you're trying to focus is tack sharp. I'm using the remote like I said I would. Let's see what we get. As you can see, there is no delineation, there is no line between where the bracelet is and this circular ball of luminance behind it. Yet the reflection is showing up really nicely. Let me try angling the lens down just a hair. Nice. Okay, let's see what that looks like. There is something of a hot spot on the very top of the bracelet. Yeah, that is a little blown out. Let me try nudging down the exposure just a tiny little bit. Let's try that, see how it looks. I just took a third of a stop off. Much happier. I am absolutely thrilled to bits with that. That is exactly the effect that I was trying to get. I've got some more photographs I want to take, so while I've got this set up, I will do so. I'm very happy with how that turned out. I think as an added bonus thing, as you've so patiently sat through this whole thing, I am going to video me trying to put this softbox back in its bag. The last time I did this, I had to watch like 4 YouTube videos to make sense of what the person was doing with their arms. All right. So that's the diffusion stuff out. Now, if I remember rightly, you just push it in half and then bend it in half. You grab one corner and one middle bit. You twist this hand away from you and this hand towards you. This is where I messed up last time. I think I had them backwards, in which case it'll just fly all over the place. I think I had it backwards. Let me try this. Yes! That's it. It becomes round. Take care, everybody. I'll see you in a few days. All the best.